Howard wrote, "Life is but a web spun of ghosts and dreams and illusions." I've always been very fond of those words. Much has been written about Robert E. Howard by myself and others. That he in such a short time was able to create such vivid and visceral tales that have endured and thrived is a testament not only to his mastery of the pulp yarn, but to the men and women who came after, keeping his legacy alive and in the public eye. I discovered Howard as a young boy through his Conan stories with the provocative Frazetta and Boris covers and Marvel's comic book adaptation. Conan led me to Solomon Kane, Steve Harrison, Bran McMorn, Dark Agnes, John Kirwan, and so many others. See, Howard created authentic, vibrant worlds and populated them with unforgettable characters who lived and breathed as surely as we do ourselves. Too often overlooked are Howard's occult stories. He was a master of the horror genre, and as surely as he was adept at historical fiction, westerns, and the genre he gave birth to, sword and sorcery. 3 unsolved murders in a week are not so unusual for River Street, grunted Steve Harrison, shifting his muscular bulk restlessly in his chair. Thus read the first Steve Harrison story I stumbled upon, Names in the Black Book, a Robert E. Howard occult detective yarn that helped cement my love for the genre. Howard was not a fan of detective fiction, and I think that's why the Harrison stories appeal to me so much, because Howard's instincts fight against the genre and we get a far different sort of tale. Yes, they tend toward the yellow menace yarns prevalent in the pulp of the time, but Steve Harrison is the prototypical private eye of the sort that guys like Spillane would churn out later, and Howard brings this square-jawed tough to life as few others can. But what really makes these stories sing is that underlying supernatural threat that makes them solid occult detective tales, and the frightening figure of Eric Kahn, one of the great pulp villains. I always wanted to see more about Steve Harrison. Unfortunately, Howard left us early, so we never got to see where he might have taken Harrison. I suspect, based on pulp trends, Steve Harrison would have become a star in his own right. But the thing is, there was another set of occult detectives I found even more compelling from Howard's well-worn Underwood. Of course, it's his Conan stories that are first in my heart, but his occult detectives are nipping at the Sumerian's heels, to be sure. Edging ahead of Steve Harrison are 3 occult adventurers, John Kirwan, John Conrad, and John O'Donnell, whom find themselves in Howard's Lovecraft mythos yarns and some of my favorite horror stories ever penned. Kirwan was a reluctant occultist shying away from the vast knowledge he had earned at a terrible price. Conrad was the more eager aspirant, and who tended to draw Kirwan into his misadventures, while O'Donnell was closer akin to Conrad. Of course, Howard scholars hotly debate these figures, but I prefer to err on the side of them all being part of a collective universe, with continuity errors being just that. These tales have long fascinated me, as have the behind-the-scenes drama. Regardless of intent, I see these 3 companions the very epitome of occult detectives and choose to accept them as being bound together as a cohesive series. Howard, the undisputed father of the sword and sorcery genre, was a brilliant author, writing visceral, action-packed fictions that, when he was at his best, were filled with mood and atmosphere unequaled. He wrote with brute force and indomitable fury. Robert E. Howard was a dark poet whose words were grim reminders that the world can be a cruel and inhospitable